Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Goodwill Meditation Group webinar. Today is March 26, 2025, and we are so glad to have all of you joining us here today. As many of us know, members of this Goodwill Meditation Group link up in meditation every Wednesday at noon in their local time zones. Members of this group link together as souls, that is, as intelligent units of love, light, and goodwill, and lend their subjective support to the establishment of a worldwide culture of goodwill, one which operates without discrimination to borders, to nationality, to religion, to race, or to ideological difference. Today, this goodwill work is carried forward around the world in diverse ways and by numberless groups throughout the world, each working in their own way. These practical mediating groups, we could call them, simply seek to apply both heart and mind to the building of a better world. The unique vision which each of these groups seeks to materialize gives diverse and living forms to this worldwide goodwill work. This goodwill meditation group finds its place definitely within this wider worldwide group, one among countless groups working towards a common end. And though open to all, the meditation offered by World Goodwill is specific, and it is intentional in the role that it plays within this worldwide work. The meditation, which we will shortly do, is essentially what we would call esoteric or occult, which means that it works with underlying causes, with the essence or the soul of things, and it seeks to externalize that essence and to make it manifest on earth through human thinking, through human relationships, ultimately through human activity. The meditation draws its power from the soul and the group nature of that soul. Via the soul, the group aims to establish an unimpeded alignment between the world of cause and the world of effect, or you could say the world of ideal forms and the outer imperfect reflections of those forms. Through the establishing of this unimpeded alignment or relationship with the soul, all things can be made new, they can be made whole, complete, and true. This metaphysical approach to cause, combined with a practical orientation to the production of beneficent effects, situates this meditation group very much at the heart of the worldwide group of servers. Now, this position at the heart is not meant to denote a privileged position per se, but rather to acknowledge the assumption of a unique and necessary responsibility. As the heart, this meditation group works with essential love and with the life principle, the will or power from which all love proceeds, and which therefore is love in the highest sense. To work at or from the heart means not to work with the life principle, but as the life principle, and to circulate this energy, this principle, this will to good throughout the worldwide network, and thereby play our part within the wider group. So this will to good, this love, it becomes goodwill once it's expressed in human relationships. Goodwill dissolves all cleavages, all separation, and it is the natural result of soul alignment. Goodwill creates an atmosphere of unity, which allows for profound differences in the outer form while maintaining a non-separative consciousness at the same time. And it is within this tension between unity and diversity that all spiritual principles, every spiritual quality, and every virtue which humankind could possibly possess finds expression. And so thank you all for being here today. It's a bit of a longer introduction, but we're very glad to have you all participating in this important work. Um, so just to clarify, though, this meditation group does meet every week. This webinar, which is held on the final Wednesday of every month, seeks to support the ongoing work of this weekly meditation group. And so we do invite those of you who are regular attendees of this webinar and who have not yet established a weekly rhythm to consider doing so. While goodwill can exist wherever we say the human heart, the mind, and the hand are allied in service, this subjective work definitely supports the, as I said, the cultivation of a spiritual atmosphere and a spiritual reservoir from which the worldwide network of goodwill workers can draw their strength, their power to love, also to increase their ability of insight, of vision, of inspiration, keener discernment, wisdom. And so this more regular weekly subjective link up is a way to support that necessity. And so now let us just take a moment to link together as a group to sound the mantram of the new group of world servers. May the power of the one life pour through the group of all true servers. May the love of the one soul characterize the lives of all who seek to aid the great ones. May we fulfill our part in the one work through self-forgetfulness, harmlessness, and right speech. So after our meditation today, we will have an interview with World Goodwill coworker Maria Teresa Gonzalez Esquivel, who will speak about her work in the field of international development, and specifically security sector governance in Latin America. And I will leave all the details of this work and the role that Goodwill plays in it to after the meditation. But before we move on with our meditation, I would like to just say a few words about the reasons why this webinar follows its meditation every month with these special presentations or interviews and usually group discussion on relevant themes to this Goodwill work. So one of the webinar's aims in supporting the meditation work is to draw a clear line from goodwill as a subjective quality to the ways and means in which this quality works out in human relationships broadly. Writing, speaking, communicating, interacting, including discussion with others, are means of externalization, of expression, ultimately of creativity, making the inner essence or the soul, you could say, objective, making the subjective objective. So these are thus, we consider these very much essential counterparts to our meditation work. World Goodwill's mission is one of applied esotericism, or of externalizing and unveiling this, you could say, hidden quality of the soul. Soul and heart are generally interchangeable in the esoteric philosophy, both being essentially the basis of goodwill. And so, but that special and redemptive and you could say sort of magically unifying power of the soul, it only becomes goodwill at all when it's made objective and expressed through the medium of human agency, human will of some sort. And so it is partly for this reason that World Goodwill supports those participating in the meditation work to also educate themselves on some of the exoteric aspects of world problems. Doing so assists one to more fully understand world need and can be thought of as a way of equipping oneself to be more useful in contributing to a thought form of solution to world problems. We therefore, during these latter periods of our webinar, invite you to carry through the spiritual, we could say the spiritual altitude or the high point of alignment, or the general alignment, I suppose you could say, as a result of that meditation. Whatever that is, attained, to carry that through to the talk and the discussion which follows. For instance, while listening to these presentations and discussions, one might wish to keep an active and open mind, perhaps posing to oneself questions such as, what really is the problem here in terms of the sort of the spiritual need or the spiritual necessity at play? How do we define this problem in terms of a deficit of relationships, for instance? What spiritual factors, sorry, what spiritual principles can factor into both problem and solution? Keeping in mind, of course, that there is no field of human enterprise which is not spiritual in the truest sense of the word. We could also ask something like, what really are the causes of these problems if we were to trace them from, the purely objective to the more subjective causes, those lying in the realm of, say, human agency or human intention or human purpose, human destiny even. What would it even take to begin to heal these problems, to truly heal them? What would true healing look like? And so in asking these questions and holding the mind opened and aligned, but not abstracted in the mystical sense, one might begin to touch upon one of the most important uses of the mind, which is as a means of bridging, of relating higher and lower, which is key ultimately to the application of the mind as a means of redemption and of renewal. So with that in mind, let us now move on to our meditation. The outline will appear on your screen, and I will also read it aloud. We begin by linking up in thought with all those people throughout the world who are working with this Goodwill meditation group. We reflect upon the fact of relationship. We are each related to our families, our communities, our nations, the world of nations, and the one humanity made up of all races and nations. We use the mantra of unification. The souls of all are one, and I am one with them. I seek to love, not hate. I seek to serve and not exact due service. I seek to heal, not hurt. Let pain bring due reward of light and love. Let the soul control the outer form and life and all events, and bring to light the love that underlies the happenings of the time. Let vision come and insight. Let the future stand revealed. Let inner union demonstrate and outer cleavages be gone. Let love prevail. Let all people love. Reflect upon your own and humanity's relationship with all beings who dwell in the higher realms of mind and heart. The spiritual hierarchy of saints, rishis, bodhisattvas, and masters, honored by all the world's religions and spiritual groups. Imagine that you are standing together within the center of the spiritual hierarchy, immersed in the consciousness of the heart of love. For some, this heart of love is known as the Christ. Other faiths have other names for the one at the center. Maintaining that high point of contact lets your thoughts reach out to include all members of the human family in whom the energy of goodwill is active. Use the affirmation. In the center of all love, I stand. From that center, I, the soul, will outward move. From that center, I, the one who serves, will work. May the love of the divine self be shed abroad in my heart, through my group, and throughout the world. Visualize the energy of love flowing from the hierarchy through the men and women of goodwill and into the hearts and minds of all people, infusing them with goodwill and creating loving and harmonious human relationships. Meditate on ways of spreading goodwill, creating right human relationships, and restoring peace on earth. Realize that you are helping to build a channel between the spiritual hierarchy and humanity, through which the energy of goodwill may flow, uniting humanity, solving its problems, and healing all cleavages. Linked in thought with the men and women of goodwill all over the world, say the great invocation. We will use the adapted version below. Say it with deliberation and with full commitment to its meaning, knowing that you are radiating its potent energies to humanity. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into human minds. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into human hearts. May the coming one return to earth. From the center, where the will of God is known, let purpose guide all little human wills, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the human race, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Right, thank you, everyone. I'd like to now invite Maria Teresa. If you could turn on your mic, unmute yourself.
Hello, Michael, and hello, everyone.
Hi, Maria. Thanks so much for joining us here today. Um, just a brief introduction for everybody. Maria Teresa is a World Goodwill coworker here in New York. But she also works with an international NGO, or sorry, an international governmental organization, which works on security sector governance worldwide. But today, Maria will be talking about that organization's work specifically in Latin America, which is where her department focuses. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Awesome. So, you've worked for some years now in a sector of international development, as I said, called security sector governance. Um, I was, I thought perhaps you could start off by telling us a bit about what security sector governance is. What is it? Why is it important?
Yes, thank you, Michael. Well, I think it's important to break this question into two parts. To begin with, just the traditional definition of governance, which is the exercise of power and authority. Traditionally, we relate governance with the government because the government is the entity that exercises power and authority. Now, in terms of security sector governance, it's important to understand that not only the government provides governance. In many cases, if we think about like public goods, you can think about electricity, and it may be the private sector providing that public good. So in a way, they exercise some sort of governance by just making decisions and providing a public good. So relating it back to security, the state is not the only actor involved in security provision or in issues related to security. There's also other non-state actors that participate in issues of security, both formally but also informally. So the definition we use for security sector is something broader than, it goes beyond than the police and the armed forces. Security sector is, again, all of those actors, both the state and non-state actors that participate in issues related to security. So we do have the police, we do have the armed forces, but we also have other state actors such as ombuds institutions, which work on securing human rights. We also have the Congress or the parliaments in the role of all the budget allocation for security actors, but also on the role of oversight that they do over the work of the security sector actors, traditional ones, police again, or the military. We also have the judiciary, that's another key actor of the sector, but we also have non-state actors, such as the media. They play a very big role in terms of the oversight of the work of the security sector, all the actors I already mentioned. But we also have organized civil society, NGOs, that also work on the oversight or just trying to improve or influence policymaking to ensure that the security sector provides a security that is more aligned with the needs of the communities. And of course, we have other non-state actors. We're talking about like illegal armed groups, guerrillas, there's other, like a broad range of actors. So seeing this as a broader definition of the security sector, then we can just narrow it down the definition that it involves those decisions related to security, both, with the state actors, non-state actors, and it can be formal and informally. So that's like an overview of what security sector governance does. So we work with multiple actors as the ones described. And what we try to do is that we provide advice and guide them into making decisions related to security that align to democratic values and overall to the real needs of local communities.
And okay, no, that's really great. So perhaps you go into a bit more detail about the work of this organization, specifically like what role, I mean, trying to get at, I think the audience to get a better idea of like the scope of what this organization does, but also maybe the role that Goodwill plays in it as well. We can start to get at the heart of that. So maybe you could go into a bit more detail about the work of this organization, some of not the specific projects, I know you probably can't talk about those, but just more about the role they do, and if you could also the role that building relationships plays in that.
Of course. Thank you, Michael. Well, now just moving on into more of the practical aspect of the work. As I was describing, we work with different actors. So for instance, like in the case of the work I do in Latin America, we work mostly with police forces, and we also include a strong component of work with civil society. Again, security, it's like has two elements. One of them is like facts, which is, the number of crimes, the number of homicides, like that type of view of security. But security is also a perception. And, perception is important because you may see, and I'm going to bring the role of the media here. Their role is just to bring to the public information of public interest, something that is relevant and that has an impact on everyone's lives. So talking about insecurity and just crime and violence, it's important. That's why they do it, because they are trying to pay attention, just to bring the attention into those issues that have an impact on many of us. But at the same time, they are also shapers of perceptions. Like if in some cases, in some countries where there's just high rates of violence, different types of violence, it's common that all you hear or read on the news is, crime and death and homicides. So that plays a big role into shaping the perception of security. It doesn't mean it's not happening. I mean, and again, it's important to bring visibility to those issues. But you may be living in an area that is far away from those areas where all of these issues are happening, and you start feeling the insecurity, so it's more about the perception. So that's why it's important also to work with these actors. So one line of work that we do involves working with police and journalists. There's also more type of specific work that we do with police forces. For instance, they have like lots of protocols and guidelines on the use of force. So we work with them to ensure that those guidelines and protocols align to what is considered best practice internationally, basically respecting human rights. So we work with those police forces that are interested in improving the way they provide security in alignment with these best practices, because in the end, doing that work enables a better relationship between the police with the communities. So that matters. It's not just about complying with the law. I mean, they are law enforcement officials, and the name explains it itself. They are supposed to enforce the law, but there's ways to do it that can enable police having a better relationship with communities. And so communities play a big role in security. They can just inform police of what's going on. They can also bring the needs so that police can design like specific strategies on how to work with them. And again, make sure they are fulfilling those needs. So that's a key aspect of this work. There's also some other issues. I would say police forces are traditionally like a male institution, this whole aspect of the gender roles. But there has been a big push to make sure police forces are representative of the communities they serve. So that means I may have an issue and I may feel uncomfortable talking to a male police officer. And maybe I feel more comfortable talking about the issues that I experience with a female police officer. So that's what it matters, that having that representativeness. So we also work with them to ensure they integrate what's called technically like gender mainstreaming, which is not just making sure they have women. So the gender mainstreaming has a good approach into making sure you understand the communities and the persons you're working with, so that you tailor your strategies and your actions to the needs they have, because everyone has different needs. So that's an important aspect. And the type of work that we do has a lens on human security, which I think it's also important to highlight. Security doesn't mean the same to everyone. For some people, it may mean not being robbed or not being raped for women, but for others, it may mean having enough money to bring food to the table for my family. Or it can mean I'm sick and I need access to health. Or if I live in a rural area or in an area that's experiencing issues with the climate, maybe, that my house doesn't get flooded. That's security. So all of these different dimensions of security are really important to understand for security sector actors, because they may not be able to solve all the issues related to these different dimensions of security. But what they can do is understand like the root causes of in security and see what they can do just to fulfill a role or just to fill in a gap. And also to identify which other actors they need to be working with to ensure that security, human security dimension, like the 7 dimensions are basically covered. So this involves a lot of work with building relationships, because in the end, there's two aspects. Of course, you need like the technical knowledge, you need to know the context, I mean, the country, you need to understand that. But if you don't have that connection with the people that you're working with, you just are going to end up hitting a wall. So it involves a lot of trust building. And again, how do you work on that? It's through building the relationship. You have to come closer together, listen to the people, use lots of active listening, empathy. I think that's a very important aspect so that you understand others. I mean, we work with multiple actors, as I just described. On one side, sometimes we have police, but on the other side, we have local communities that may be having issues with police. So there's, I think, in general, it's mostly humanitarian work, but I'm glad to see that the development sector is really aligning their work with humanitarian principles, such as impartiality. Humanity is the main one, just is the driving force to do the work, and just that compassion aspect. So I think putting all of those elements together is really key so that you can really have like an entry in the places where we're trying to do the work. And those just act as connectors of the different actors and the different issues.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. That's great. Yeah, I feel like probably one of the overriding themes of international development over the last 10 years is this need to do like cross-sector interactions. So it's like security, development, human rights, all these things interact, and it's like, how do we make them interact in a way that's not just say, okay, well, everything's related, like there has to be a way that it's practically applied, and that relationship it's sort of a great balancing act in some ways also, because you have to really integrate everything into everything. A great sort of extensive practice of integration in some ways. But I just wanted to highlight one thing. Some of our members will be familiar with the four freedoms as expressed by U.S. President FDR Roosevelt around the time of the founding of the UN. And one of those was that the human being has an essential right to have a freedom from fear. And so listening to what you speak about the security sector governance, it's like, wow, yeah, you can say we have an inherent right or we should have this. But then what does it really take to secure that? It doesn't take, it seems like so it's been expanded. Okay, well, you have military, you have war. Okay, well, now you have crime. Well, now you have this whole development architecture. Okay, well, now you even have like human rights. So now you have this on the ground work, which I'll ask you more about this in a second, but this sort of on the ground work of actually sometimes mediating between different actors in the communities, say police and civil society, or the government and civil society, or whoever, that it really has to be drawn down to the very lowest level in order to really be solidified there. So it's a very incredible work you're doing. So thank you. But just to continue that, because this is really, I want to hear from you, not me, obviously. What does I wanted to follow up with a question about the role that mediation plays. You spoke about relationship a bit, but I understand your work there in Latin America, often you have to take on a mediating role between actors. So could you speak a bit more about that?
Yes, no, thank you, Michael. I would say yes, mediation, plays a big role on the work that we do. But I would say it's a combination between relationship building. Again, going back to, in order to build a relationship, the way we do it, we approach actors without any judgment. We do not take any sides. Again, it's important to actively listen to both of them. Because I'm like, I think now I can say I really believe that multiple realities can coexist in the same world. Sometimes that's difficult to see, but when you come closer together to just different groups having these issues, like you do get to see that. So it's really important to approach the people that we work with that impartiality and neutrality and just the empathy. I think I like to do the analogies, like if you're wearing like some glasses, they have like a blue cover, you're gonna see everything blue. So what I try to do, or we try to do, is just come up with this like clear, transparent lens so that we can actually see, people and the issues as they are without anything blurring, what we have in front of us. So in that case, I think it's important also to approach actors and the issues with an open mind. Like, again, you cannot come in with preconceived ideas of the issues of both actors, because then that's the way you're going to see everything, Like, we have many people ask the question like, but, police forces, Latin America, so corrupt, they're the bad guys. I mean, not really. Like, I found, in my experience, you always find these amazing people within the institutions that are really pushing to do the job. You can see it's a vocation for them, and they're really committed to improve the way they work, within the institution. So you find them everywhere. Of course, if I come with the lens of, the bad guy is corrupt, I'm just gonna see everyone like that. So making sure you don't have anything blurring that vision allows you to connect better with them. So when it comes the time that we have to bring, to the table, or just to work together with these two actors that may have, like a history of issues that many cases, like real hate, distrust. And it's important to say that in many cases it's justified. There's a reason why it has happened. It's very useful to use this lens, just to see things the way they are, not taking the sides. And in a way, maybe it's useful sometimes to have that positivity lens. Of course, you have to be careful, because we have this approach of, and comes with mediation and the type of work we do and it's also a humanitarian principle of do no harm. Maybe if you come with a very, what they say now, like, mainstream stuff of toxic positivity, you may end up doing harm. Because maybe I do have the intention of, improving relationship and getting, making sure they get better along, and then there's no more issues between them. But if I'm just wearing that like positivity lens all the time, I'm just gonna miss some elements that are important to understand and to work on them before pushing to hard actors, to come closer together. So I think that's really important when we do this sort of mediation. But I would say the core of the work is in just building relationships, and it has to be the right type of relation, because I've seen people that work on this and they just focus on the more mundane part of the work, which is, I don't know, we have to train officers or a group of journalists. Let's just do it. But they just don't see the big picture, and that we're trying to transform those relationships. So there's more steps and more work involved, and that entails, again, having the right type of relationship with the actors.
Would you say establishing a personal, like one-on-one relationship helps those actors sometimes with the so-called enemy, other side?
No, I mean, it does, because also working with the state actors, like we tend to, like we also rehumanize institutions. Again, an institution is something created by the human and it's run by humans. So we just have to remember that.
Yeah.
In the end, it's like, I think it has a negative effect in societies, just thinking about, again, police as the police, a thing. It's not a thing. It's comprised of people, and those people are humans. So it's important to work at that level, and the way those humans interact matters. Then there's this phrase of, we need to take care of those that are taking care of us. If we don't care about them, their conditions, how are they going to be in a good place to provide the type of service that we need? So we do need to pay attention to that. And sometimes thinking about an institution as the police as the thing, you just forget about the humans behind.
Mhm.
And also it's a negative in the sense that in terms of accountability, if you think about the police and you generalize and say
Yeah.
all the police do this, or all the journalists or all the human rights defenders, you are dehumanizing the people behind. And there's just no, with the state institutions, you lose the accountability because it's an institution, it's not a person. So one person does make a difference. And again, I think I just want to emphasize, there's just amazing people really trying to improve things all over the world. So it's just about like identifying them and working with them just to build like a bigger network of, I would say, goodwill so that the work can be done, just focusing on the work rather than other issues that sometimes distract the attention from what actually matters and, the long-term impact of the work.
Mhm. Um, what sort of, just to take this back to so thank you, that was a great answer. But just to take this now back to sort of the macro level a little bit, what sorts of, and I know you can't talk about a lot of the projects specifically because they're necessarily private because the nature of the work that you're doing is sometimes very sensitive. But if you could in some way relate to us the sort of larger societal impacts that one can suspect from this sort of work, say at like the country level, like within a country, what sort of, or between larger groups in a society, what are the sort of types of effects that are positive effects that can result from this sort of work you do?
Yeah, I mean, for instance, I can tell you about briefly, just again, we're transforming relationships and we're working with actors that are key into security issues. So we've done work with journalists and police, and the nature of the roles put them in an opposite position in many cases, and it should be like that. They do different type of work, but in the end, they are also committed to one shared objective, which is upholding human rights. So police will be upholding all the human rights and protecting them. And journalists may be focusing on the right to freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. So in the end, those are human rights. So they play a big role into, the perception of security, the interactions with the right to protest, all of those conditions. So by focusing on bringing those two actors together, they need to have the will. That's very important. And again, when we find will, we can do amazing things. If there's no will, it's just very difficult to have an entry. But just by aligning their wills and just helping them to see those shared objectives, in a way, you're rehumanizing them again. You're not a journalist, you're not a police, you're both humans. So let's begin with that. You have these different roles, but there's a way to work together, fulfilling each of your missions in a way that is with less confrontation, less violence. So we've seen cases where the relationship was like really bad from the beginning. They just hated each other. They didn't want to come closer together. But as we start doing the work, we just work a lot on building trust and just making sure that we're seeing that bigger picture and the objective. Relationship change. So we have now cases where, these organizations from civil society are helping police officers that are having issues in terms of human rights and, their conditions. And we also see a different approach and tone from the police to civil society and journalists in general. They now understand other needs and they see things that before these interactions and this relationship, they were not seeing. So that has a benefit for all of society. It just really helps to shape that relation. And again, that permeates into the whole of society, just reducing polarization at some point, thinking longer term. Just stop generalizing, like not all the police does that. Maybe one police did something wrong or two, but it's not all of them. There's good people, and likewise on the other side, So I think that's maybe an example of the work that we've made in some countries, and I think it's very rewarding seeing that, but it matters a lot to have the will of those people, just to bring them closer together and to have an impact that, will benefit everyone.
Wow, that's incredible. I know one of the major issues in Latin America is the corruption issue. There's a lot of issues with state corruption, and of course, it goes into the private sector as well. Would you say that that's sort of a way that sort of repolarization is a way of reestablishing trust? Because my understanding is the issue with corruption is often just actual corruption is often just as bad as perceived corruption, because it erodes trust, is the citizenry's trust in the government. Would you say that, do you see that sort of repolarization sort of transforming the way people see all government structures, government organizations within their governments as well? Or is it potential of like laying a foundation for that, establishing trust?
I think it definitely lays out a foundation
Mm.
for establishing trust because you stop generalizing and putting everything into the same box. Like you at some point you see there's light in a place where you thought everything was dark. So that makes you question, maybe not everything is dark, maybe there's more light. So I think in the longer term, it definitely plays a role. But also it's important to just that so that, the other non-state actors thinking about societies. Corruption does happen, but it requires two parts. Yeah, the
Mhm.
state officials, but also, you citizens, individuals like
Yeah.
you and I that either bribe that happens a lot in Latin America, unfortunately, that you bribe the police officer because you skipped a red light and you don't want to pay the whatever money
Yeah.
you need to pay, as a result of your infraction. So you are the one bribing the officer. And if you don't have that understanding that they have like very low salaries and very poor working conditions, of course they're willing to take it. They need it to bring food to home.
Mm.
So it's not just the institution again, like people plays a big role. I mean, they do. So I think bringing visibility to that, just opening the view, like just again, seeing the bigger picture, it does help in the longer term to change those perceptions into, how state works.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Maria. And unfortunately, I wasn't watching the time closely enough, and we've don't have a whole lot of time left for like discussion or Q&A. But are you free to stay maybe like at least like 10 minutes or so after?
Yes.
Okay, great. We can get some questions and then. So if anybody has a question they'd like to ask Maria, feel free to raise your hand. And I already see that one hand is up, so I'll go to David Trice. David, are you there? Can you unmute yourself? Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I was wondering if there's a website that you have that people can make donations to your organization.
Thank you very much, David. I really appreciate the your intent for the donation. The organization that I work with, like it in fact works directly with governments, so doesn't really receive the donation so far, unfortunately. But I am really happy to provide you with information of some of the organizations that we work with that again there's really people of goodwill trying just to improve the way their societies. Again, different lines of work. So I mean, if you find that also interesting, I'm happy to share that information so that you see what type of work they are doing, and maybe you can make a decision on whether to support their work. But thank you very much, David.
You're welcome.
There's lots of questions about sort of the specifics of the organization, Maria, and I didn't share much about it before, but maybe you could state briefly why um, we've avoided saying the name of the organization, just to clarify.
Yes, thank
Just
you.
because it's sensitive, if you could just explain that,
Yeah,
maybe to
exactly. Just
clarify a
again,
lot.
because
Yeah.
we work, the type of work we do, I mean, the role of impartiality, neutrality is really important. So we play like a low profile, just maybe to put it in like in simple terms. Um, because again, there's different actors, different perceptions of the work, and we just try to avoid getting into a situation where we may not be considered as impartial or neutral. It doesn't mean that we don't know in some cases what's right. Like I've seen cases of things that shouldn't be done by with the state actors that we work. But again, if I approach them, if we really want to do something about it and change that, if I approach them with the judgment, like saying, hey, that's against, law and human rights, they're just gonna shut the door. So we really need to remain very impartial. It doesn't mean that there's not like a clear pathway to, some of the main principles of humanity and just human rights. But we try to stay more on that pathway just to make sure we can continue doing our work. That's one of the assets that we can talk to anyone, everywhere, unlike other organizations that, because they receive, let's say, funding from the United States, you have this list of actors that you're not supposed to talk to, because they have sanctions. And so we don't work like that. So we play a lower profile. Again, we work with support of multiple countries and in a way that we are enabled to come closer to those actors that we need to be talking to.
Okay, great. Thank you. John, you could unmute.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for the good work and the good talk. What really resonated with me was you said that these are humans on each side, and I thank you for that. And that instead of looking for the dark, look for the light. And I think that really speaks to the strength of the work that we all do as part of World Goodwill. And I thank you and encourage you for what you're doing. And with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much, Ian. That's really nice. And I do, when I started working, with World Goodwill, just many things made sense. And I really appreciate, the work of, of course, the trust, but, all of you that are really have a genuine interest in just contributing to, bring closer humanity and just make sure we spread the love, which is, I think, the driving force behind all of this type of work. The love is that element that, makes you just keep pushing and just really working towards the more mundane objectives that we may have.
I'm just looking through the comments here if we can get any final ones.
Michael, I saw something about just the question about maybe the funding.
Oh, yes. Somebody asked about the funding.
Maybe in that, like if I can just elaborate a bit more.
Yeah.
Because that I can explain, and that's an important aspect on how, the international aid and just cooperation works. There's people of goodwill everywhere, and we see it as those countries that use part of their money, which comes from, taxpayers, and some countries also have like state-owned enterprises. But there's people of goodwill making decisions on allocating money to work in other countries. Of course, in many cases, there's an interest, and there's people that have a very specific interest. But in the end, I don't think that's counter towards the part of the goodwill. Because I may be trying to influence certain aspect of the policy of a different country, but if the consequence or the direct effect is improving conditions for the people, then I think, the objective is still legitimate. And, now we see this push of, because there are needs, again, at the national level that are not being fulfilled. And again, it's because of not considering these lenses of, human security and making sure, that people have what they need and how do we work together to achieve that. So of course, there's this big push of stop giving money to other countries and just make sure you improve market conditions. But still you see these groups, these countries that really have, I don't know, this really genuine interest on working in countries that they have really no clear relationship to, just to improve conditions for the life. So I think that's important to highlight, like some nations have this really sense of unity and cooperation, and they understand how, despite maybe these issues are far away from them, there's this connection of humanity that, drives them to continue supporting that type.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. I was going to actually touch on that in one of the questions I had planned to ask you. So great that you're able to address that now. Yeah, it's a good reminder that, that sort of tension between realpolitik and inspired idealism. You can't just presume because it feels things are getting worse that that one just go they can exist side by side, and they sort of do, sort of like the two sides of human nature, I suppose, in many ways. Um, and as you say, sometimes the opposites can exist, different realities can exist at the same time. And that's sort of the promise of salvation in some ways, promise of redemption, that's always there. Um, thank you, Marie. It's so great to hear from you. Finally, you've been with us now for a few years in World Goodwill, so it's great to hear more about this other side of your work. I think we're going to conclude now, but thank you. Is there anything in closing you wanted to say? I'm sorry, just before we close, Maria.
Thank you, Michael. No, I would just maybe like to highlight how, I think the principles, some humanitarian principles relate to the work, that we do.
Yeah.
Just thinking about the, harmlessness, self-forgetfulness, and right speech are key into this work. Because again, it matters how we approach people to build these relationships. So we have to put a lot of thought on the messages that we're delivering, the words that we use, and also keep in mind the big picture, like the objective of the work, which is transforming and improving, lives of people. And just put yourself aside of the work, just make an enabler and facilitate the work, but do not get on the way because of ego and, you want to be, the lead of a project or something. It's really important to have that self-forgetfulness. And again, the do no harm, I think has a clear relation to the harmlessness. So with that, I would like to close. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Maria. And thank you everyone for attending. Just a note about upcoming meetings. We have the next Triangles Meditation Group webinar, April 14th. And for our colleagues in Europe and the UK, we'll be back to your normal time. And then, of course, the next Goodwill Meditation Group webinar, which would be April 30th at the normal time, 12 p.m. in New York, 5 p.m. in the UK, and 6 p.m. in Central Europe. Thank you all, and have a good evening or afternoon, wherever you may be.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.